welcome to Mindset, Money, Success. I was told that the law would protect me, and I was told that if I followed the correct legal advice, the truth would come out. But what do you do when the advice that you're given actually hands a weapon back to the person who was the abuser? Today, I'm taking you back to 2020 and 2021, to the moment that I realised that in the eyes of the Spanish legal system, my 11-year relationship was being reduced to a mere precarious occupation. So I'm sharing how the conflicting advice that I received ignored the evidence, and the 5-minute hearing in a court in Cartagena, Murcia, changed everything. If you've ever felt like that system was built to fail you, then this episode is what you need as your lifeline. Welcome back to Mindset, Money, Success, and I'm Loraine. I'm rebuilding my life at 65. I'm still in Spain after a devastating financial loss and post-separation abuse. In August of 2020, my world ended in a 4-sentence, what I call a discard speech, by a person I had been with in a relationship for 11 years. I went from being a partner to basically a squatter or a precarious tenant in the blink of an eye. So today I'm going to talk about the legal advice trap. So in the beginning, you're really desperate and you need legal advice. I had all of my friends were saying, Loraine, you need legal advice, because I'd already been threatened by the man who ended our relationship. He had promised financial security in retirement. He had written his letter, which started Dear Loraine, and spelled out all of what his intentions were in order to ensure that I would have financial security in retirement in Spain. He delivered that letter by email, and it never actually got notarized. Because within a few days of him delivering his discard speech and then the letter to say, look, here's what I'm prepared to do, he basically turned very nasty. And when he turned nasty, he threatened that he could throw me out onto the streets within days of promising half the value of the property that he was putting up for sale, a total of 115,000 euros. So we were together for 4 weeks in 2020, where I was in fear and uncertain of what was going to happen next. 1 minute he was nice, then the next minute he was being nasty again. So I was keeping out of the way. Now, the advice that I got was in September after he left. I didn't really have any opportunities to get any advice while he was there. So the first advice I got was in writing by email. Bearing in mind, 2020, there was lots of restrictions on movement and restrictions because we were wearing masks to go out in different places. And so there was lots of restrictions in September 2020. And so I got legal advice by email. And that first legal advice was, you should stay in the property and you should negotiate with this person. And the lawyer said he can't just throw you out because he would have to go to court and get an eviction order. So that was the advice I got. She didn't understand what had happened. I did try to explain, and I did have the letter, and I did have 26-minute long recording. And that recording was evidence of how he shut down the discussion, made it into a one-sided verbal onslaught where I was threatened, verbally abused, humiliated, blamed. There was a gaslighting that I lacked empathy and I was a loser. It shows you up for the loser that you are. And I was just sat there practically silent when I did get the opportunity to say something, because he stopped and asked if I had any questions. And I asked a question, and then he basically went into what would be called a verbal aggression, anger and rage. So this first lawyer didn't understand any of that, and I didn't ask anything about abuse or anything like that, because I, at that point, didn't understand anything about abuse and abusive situations, because I felt that it was just normal. That was him. That was how he reacted. And it was a normal situation. I'd grown up in the 60s and the 70s in a family situation where my parents would be verbally aggressive and shout. And I can remember sitting at the kitchen table about to eat food on numerous occasions as a child when there would be some real anger and shouting about the food or some other thing, and I couldn't even pick my fork up to eat because I felt sick to the pit of my stomach and I couldn't eat anything. So the anger and shouting, the aggression, the anger outbursts, for me, that was like I was normalising it, and I was making excuses for the things that had happened previously within the relationship. So when it came to the second piece of advice, which I was able to meet a solicitor face-to-face, that solicitor could understand English. And so I took the emails, I took the recording that was on my mobile phone and went to get the advice. And that lawyer was giving me advice to file a gender violence complaint. Now, I was basically shocked by that. And I immediately asked that solicitor, well, I don't really want to file a complaint. Can you just write to his solicitor? And that lawyer, that solicitor told me, did you not hear what he said? Because in the recording that I had played to him, the ex-person was shouting that you can't negotiate with me, is what he was shouting. A lot of other things as well, obviously. And I just paid for that advice and walked out of the office. And it for weeks, it seemed like weeks, I couldn't do anything. I didn't want to file a complaint to the police. So I did the next best thing, is what I thought was the next best thing, which wasn't, because basically I informed his solicitor in writing by emailing and telling his solicitor the advice I had received to file a gender violence complaint, and that I didn't want to file a complaint. So I was asking his solicitor, which used to be our solicitor, I was asking that solicitor to help with negotiation or mediation, and that was a huge mistake. But I didn't realise at the time what a huge mistake I was making in writing that email, basically, to the person who was the enemy. So all of this advice, the unpaid advice and the paid advice, at a point was swimming around in my head, and I didn't know what I should do. Eventually, I was triggered by an email that was sent from that solicitor. Our solicitor sent an email which caused me significant trauma. So significant that I had to phone the Samaritans in Spain. And I think I was on the telephone for over an hour before I was able to compose myself and get back to some emotional stability. And all of this that I'm talking about today, I actually published in a book under a pen name, because I realised that the advice that I received didn't help, and so I wanted to raise awareness of that, and I already knew that I wanted to publish a book. I wanted to write a book. I knew that from the very first evening on the night of the 4-sentence discard speech. This idea just came straight into my head, and I think I actually spoke it straight out, that I was going to write a book. So he was sitting there on one sofa, I was sitting there on another sofa that night, and I told him I was going to write a book. And then I couldn't do anything about writing a book, to be honest. I was in so much trauma after the end of the relationship. I didn't even start writing that book until April of 2021. So anyway, that and moving forward, I didn't understand anything about verbal abuse. I didn't understand anything about coercive control. I haven't even heard of anything to do with narcissistic personality disorder and narcissistic traits and narcissistic abuse. I'd never heard anything about that. And it wasn't until after October of 2020 that I was able to watch lots of videos. I started to see these popping up all of the time on my YouTube channel, and I started to educate myself on all of these different forms of abuse, which I actually refer to as hidden forms of abuse, because mostly it's not physical abuse. It's quite a lot of emotional and psychological manipulation and abuse. There's lots of verbal aggression, and there can be anger outbursts. Of course, later then I realised that there had been physical abuse in the relationship that had stretched over a long period of time. And that, I think, really caused more trauma than the actual incidents that happened within the 4 weeks of him doing the discard speech, but there was worse to come. Because after following that advice to file that complaint, the complaint got dismissed. In January of 2021, the court heard the second hearing, and that lawyer that I had written all of the emails to explain the situation, to explain the advice I'd received, and that I didn't want to file the gender violence complaint, and I was asking him to negotiate. That lawyer, that solicitor, actually stood up in the gender violence court for his client, right, against me, when he had all of the information that I'd written to him, and I didn't think that was fair. But anyway, that's a different thing. I actually went to seek legal advice, and I had a mediator. From January of 2021, I had a mediator who lasted until about May, June of 2021. So in between, I think it was April, or March, actually sought some more legal advice. And in that legal advice, I was told to not make any more complaints because you will make him angry. Well, imagine that you've seen his anger lots of times over the years, and now you've got a solicitor giving you advice not to file any more complaints because you'll make him angry. And the language barrier, if only I could have just spoken Spanish to that person, I think there would have been a lot of angry response to that, what she told me. But because there was a translator in the room, I couldn't, there was no way to communicate. I had to communicate to the translator had to communicate to the lawyer, and vice versa. So there wasn't me having this response straight away to that lawyer. So anyway, on that advice in 2021, I decided to attempt another negotiation because the mediator had been sacked by me for failing to make a first instalment which had been agreed on part of a settlement. There was a payment that was supposed to be paid to my bank account to help me because I was left with no earnings. I wasn't bringing any money in whatsoever. I was in a complete shock, state of anxiety. I wasn't sleeping. I had insomnia, and there was lots of things going on which, caused harm, basically, psychological, emotional harm. I think it must have been about the 6th or the 7th attempt that occurred in middle of 2021 in July, because there was a potential buyer for the property that I was actually occupying at that point. And then there was a financial settlement, and it was agreed. It was actually a handwritten note that, because we were face to face in the open air at a bar, I actually got him to sign. We initialed every page and signed this handwritten note, which he then asked me to type up, which I did. And it was meant to be going to go to the notary to be agreed. The appointment was the potential buyers were really interested and wanted to put a deposit down. Before they went to the notary, because I wasn't invited along, before the buyer and the ex-person went to the notary, he actually emailed the document back to me, which then had changed a couple of the terms in that document without asking first. And the change in the document that he made was that the money that was agreed in the settlement, and I had wrote down it would be paid, the money would be paid on a sale being agreed, which means if there's a deposit paid down and a sale's being agreed, then that money could be paid forward. And he changed that term to the money would be paid on vacant possession. So that in itself caused a lot of stress, because previously with the lawyer in the gender violence organisation, they had said it should be money first, then leave. And so the tables were being turned on me, and I didn't have anywhere to, I didn't have any lawyer, didn't have any advocate, I didn't have any help. So there was no way for me to say, no, this is not how it should be, this is how it should be. Someone should have been in between me and him, a mediator or a solicitor, or even better, he had a solicitor and I had a solicitor. That would have been easy. Two solicitors make the conversation, which keeps it all documented, basically. So any changes and alterations, we can see who is making the changes, who is making the alterations, who is moving and shifting all the goalposts, because it's documented between the two solicitors. And 9 times out of 10, the person who is moving the goalposts the most is the person who is the high conflict person, the abuser. And so that financial settlement, I thought, right, that's proof. And then when the precarious eviction that he had filed, and I knew about because I had seen his email that he had written to the mediation company to tell them that he had instructed a new lawyer in Barcelona, and that new lawyer had had his fees, and he knew it was going to be expensive. So basically he was ignoring the settlement that was reached, which was 40,000. The settlement with the mediation company was 40,000. But I think what happened was he changed, he kept moving the goalposts all the time. So I don't think the mediation company were quite okay with that, right? So anyway, what happened next? It was 2022 when he was sending me another email about a potential buyer. And his first email in 2022 was just a nice email he's got a potential buyer, but it was like, Happy New Year, Loraine, as if nothing had happened in the year before. Nothing had happened, and that he hadn't threatened us, that he hadn't shouted at us. It was just a straightforward email, as if there was nothing that had gone on. And I replied, yes, it's okay, I will accommodate a viewing if you honour the first agreement. Now, there's nothing wrong in saying that, but he obviously was angered by that email that I sent. And the next email I got was the nasty, vindictive email, which then he said, have you not read the court documents? Have you not seen the court documents? And obviously I hadn't seen the court documents. And he wrote in the email, you are now at risk of Guardia Civil turning up, and you will be asked to leave with just your personal possessions. I read that email and my stomach sank, and I was pacing up and down the lounge late in the evening thinking, oh my God, no, what the heck, right? Totally in shock. But then there was this ping, and my mind was saying, hold on a minute. He wants you to be in fear. And that was the point where I knew that was what he was trying to do. It's part of the manipulation. It's part of the psychological manipulation and abuse. He wanted me to feel in fear by threatening the guardia would turn up at the gate and I'd be asked to leave. And when I forwarded that particular message, that email, to the first solicitor I'd paid, the one that had given the advice to file the gender violence complaint, he wrote back and then told me, no, that's not true. It has to go to court first. And then the advice was I need to find a lawyer, I need to stop the process, and you should go and collect those documents yourself. And that's what I did. So in the middle of 2022, after I've got this public appointed lawyer and I've stopped all the court process, and I'm sort of going through all of the process of that, I was unable to earn. I'd actually started learning a new skill in 2021, just in the point where we did the negotiation and the settlement. I started learning a new skill. I was creating videos and putting them on YouTube, which had links to affiliate products that were launching in the Make Money Online space. And after a number of videos went out, a number of months passed, I was actually starting to earn money in 2021. It was a very small amount of money, but it showed proof that, yes, consistency in doing something actually works, and you can start to earn an income online. But by 2022 in the January, when I was like blasted with this email and then told like you're going to be evicted, the earning capacity just dropped right off. Now, I don't know how many of you out there can resonate with that, but there is some research out there that says 99% of the domestic abuse that happens actually includes financial abuse in various forms, right? Now, I've only just found that research because I didn't even know that research existed, but I actually like to do research. So if I've got questions, I want answers, I actually go to do some deep research, and I do use AI tools to do that. And that's how I've managed to write a number of articles that I push out weekly. In 2022, I was appointed a free public lawyer, and I was forced into this civil court verbal hearing. Now, I knew I had evidence, and the lawyer that I had ignored the gender violence hearing because it had been dismissed. She says, that's the criminal court, this is different, this is the civil court. So she ignored the gender violence hearing. She ignored the shared financial situation. She ignored the letter of intention where he'd offered this financial settlement of 50% of the value of the house. She ignored the signed agreement of 2021, which was saying he would pay a settlement. None of that evidence actually made it into the court. And she asked if I had any questions that I wanted to ask. And I made a list of a couple of questions and I sent them by email thinking, well, yes, I'll be able to get some questions asked. And she wrote an email back and she said, I can't ask those questions. I was like, what? But so, I ended up going to the court 5 days before the hearing, and I wanted to submit the evidence myself. But I wasn't actually aware that in Spain it's different to the UK. You can't just do your own sort of legal representation, and you need to have the lawyer and the attorney has to file the evidence. But I'd gone to the court anyway, so I told a court official what had happened. I told this woman the situation I was in, explained different things, showed her the evidence, and she said it was too late to file the evidence. But also, I was told, your solicitor is not helping you. You need to file an official complaint. But I still didn't understand why she was telling me that. I didn't understand why she thought that solicitor wasn't helping, because I was in so much trauma 5 days before the hearing, and my lawyer was telling me the judge will order your eviction. So can you imagine how stressed a person can be to be told that the judge is just going to say, right, you're evicted, and then what? Not one professional person, not one lawyer, not any social services worker had actually said to me, you'll be all right because we have to find you housing, or we can find you a place to live, or none whatsoever. And so you just think, oh, right, okay, what am I going to do? You're just in basically a blur. The verbal hearing on the June of 2022, I turn up, and that hearing lasted 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Because I found out in 2023, when I got the files from that public appointed lawyer, I found out that she had written a letter to the court through the attorney to tell them that she was not going to interrogate the plaintiff, my ex-romantic partner, and that the reason for not wanting to interrogate the plaintiff was neither party speaks or understands Spanish. And the next reason was her client, me, had no form of income. And so the court would have to appoint a translator. That was the part that I didn't know, and that was the reason why the court official had actually given me the advice to sack that public appointed lawyer. Now, if I had been granted a lawyer who actually looked at the evidence of the financial ties and the evidence that I had, then that precarious eviction court hearing should never have gone ahead, because I wasn't a squatter. I was a partner, and I had been promised a settlement. So I have made mistakes, and I'm sharing my journey to raise awareness of the legal cracks that I fell through, and then I want to help other women to avoid the same mistakes and to help them get through false allegations and false litigations when it's a post-separation abuse experience. I know that the laws in Spain and in the UK are not fit for purpose, and that cohabiting women are usually looked at as, it's because they're unmarried, the abuse that's happened is ignored, basically. And it's the same for women who are married and have children, and there's a custody battle. They go to a lawyer because that's the first thing you do when you've got someone threatening to take your children away, wanting a divorce, don't want to pay any money, the settlement or anything, then you think the law is going to be there to help and protect you and to serve you. But what happens is, in many cases, a woman can say there was abuse in the relationship. There's been abuse since the relationship ended, and the solicitors are complicit, and they advise not to bring up any of the domestic abuse in a family court for fear the children will be handed over to the other parent. And so it is a difficult situation, this post-separation abuse experience. So this is my episode for today, and what I want to say is thank you for listening to this chapter of my story. I'm currently writing my next book, and that book is in my name. It's called After the Discard, No Divorce Required. And this is where I'm going to be exposing the systemic failures and the gaps in the laws and the legal practices that are mostly complicit with helping and assisting the perpetrators to get away with all of the abuse. So if you want to support this mission and help me to keep my podcast running as I rebuild, please consider buying me a coffee. Your support helps me to continue the research, helps me with the advocacy that's needed to change these broken systems. You can find the link in the show notes. And until next time, keep your mindset strong and your evidence stronger. Now, I'm Loraine, and this is Mindset, Money, Success. Bye for now.